Thank you, Dr. Stavros, for having me here. It's good to be here. I'm so pleased that Nancy McWilliams is here. You asked me to say something a little personal before going into the main topic. Religion and spirituality to me has been sort of like New Mexico. It's a place that I love to go, but I'm afraid of going because I fear I will never return. That is really the case. I have been to New Mexico once, and I got so frightened that I'll never come back. Peru, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, these are places that I yearn to go, and I have been, and dread to go also, because I'm always afraid that I'm not coming back. Same thing sort of applies to religion and spirituality. I was born in a Muslim family, but it was it was a religious minority in India. About 80% people in India are Hindus, about 14% are Muslims. So, and the remaining Christian, Jews, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, etc. So it was a religious minority, a big minority. On the other hand, there was not much religion in the house. My father actually was a vehement and vocal and rabid atheist, and taught us from childhood that there's no such thing as God and only stupid people believe in God. My mother was a Hindu wannabe. She was desperately trying to somehow become a Hindu, so that she'll put the red dot on her forehead, which no Muslim woman was supposed to do, red color in her parting, and she even had some gods, statues, etc., at home. And my grandfather was a devout Muslim. So that really, as you can say, messed me up totally. Then two other influences happened. One was that I was exposed to 4 very important deaths as a child. At age 4, at 6.5, and 9, and 10.5. 4 people that I deeply loved died. And I think that not only the death itself, but the rituals around death and the burial, I was present at all burials. I think that created some kind of unresolved intrigue, mystery about life and death, and about questions that always remain floating, needing answers and yet causing dread. On top of that, I was growing up in a country, India, where any child who's born, the moment the child breathes, 3 things go into the child. One is Bollywood, second is tuberculosis, and third is God. So these 3 things, it's impossible to avoid. If you're Indian, you have to be a believer. So so I actually believe that Indian people are Hindus, Hindu Muslims, Hindu Christians, Hindu Jews, Hindu Sikhs. The Hinduism is like tuberculosis. It goes in you. It goes in you. You cannot go get a haircut without looking at God's pictures. And all these, many of them very buxom goddesses. So you're getting a haircut, and looking at the breasts of all these goddesses. So obviously it also causes Oedipal fixation, as you can imagine. So with this kind of background, what ended up happening was, really, in all candor, in all honesty, what ended up happening was that it left a sort of faith hunger inside of me. A hunger for some kind of organizing system to believe in, a faith hunger, which is the term that I coined last night before going to sleep, or maybe in sleep, who knows? That kind of faith hunger in which that a part of me wanted to know how things begin, how things are related, how things end up, and so on and so forth. So it made me write a dictionary of psychoanalysis, made me memorize all poets in my mother tongue, made me know in psychoanalysis who is after whom, etc., etc., etc. Kind of an organizing system, and for a while, Kernberg addiction. That's another condition. that I've described. People buy Otto Kernberg's book, nobody reads them. They're just, they're just for buying, especially the early books. So I went through Kernberg addiction, yeah? Technical difficulty. Yeah. Okay. So I went through a bit of Kernberg addiction. I went through deep involvement with the history of Urdu poetry, and I went then into psychoanalysis and idolized, I-D-O-L-I, idolized and idealized psychoanalysis. And then bit by bit, I began to realize that there were a bunch of things that were not in psychoanalysis. So I went through a crisis of faith, thinking, will I have to leave psychoanalysis, or should I bring those things into psychoanalysis, such as India, such as China, such as Japan, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, such as animals, such as things, physical objects, and so on and so forth. So I decided to stay put in psychoanalysis and try to expand and bring into psychoanalysis what psychoanalysis did not have. Now, as far as religion and spirituality is concerned, psychoanalysis was also of not help. Although I had turned psychoanalysis into religion for myself for a while, and Freud and Kernberg into God, and Melanie Klein into goddess, but it didn't work in the end. In the end, I had to deal with myself, And I think that the solution then was that I began to think and read, and it dawned upon me that there are certain areas, and it is only so far. I mean, I have about 900 more weekends to live, right? So as a result, I perhaps will change more and think more. But so far, what has come to me is that there are 5 questions that human beings cannot answer, and they better stop attempting to answer. Because I'm a believer also in defeat. I'm a believer in victory, but I'm also a believer in defeat. There's beauty in both. So as a result, I think that 5 questions to me are unanswerable. And one is, am I masculine or am I feminine? I think that's one question. Second, am I active or am I passive? Third, am I homosexual or am I heterosexual? Fourth, will I die actually and be done with and finished and gone, bye-bye? Or am I somehow hanging around like lovely bones, or like in heaven or hell or in reincarnation coming back as a German shepherd or some such thing? That is if you're lucky. So am I really dead and done for? Or am I somehow hanging out? And finally, is there a God or is there no God? I don't think these things are solvable. I think all human beings are homosexual and heterosexual, active and passive, masculine and feminine, will die and will not die, and believe in God and do not believe in God. I think that to force this matter into some kind of closure is defensive and arrogant. I think these are questions where we have to accept defeat. Now, with this kind of my personal situation, let me move on to something. See, it became clear to me as I practiced psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, and as I read, and as I idealized and de-idealized various writers in the field, and various analysts, and my own analysts, etc., that and as it would happen, with the exposure to 4 important deaths in childhood, my analyst also died in the middle of analysis. So that when it rains, it pours. So what happens is that I began to think that there's something about the activities of the analyst in the clinical situation, such as talking. And there's a lot of literature about that, various kinds of talkings, clarification, confrontation, interpretation, transference interpretation, genetic interpretation, reconstruction, construction, affirmative interventions. I mean, there are a huge number of interventions, right? A lot of literature. There's less literature on listening, which is horrible. And a friend of mine, psychoanalyst from Brazil, says it the best, Leopold Nozek. He says, we can imagine a mute analyst, but we cannot imagine a deaf analyst. So that hearing and listening is the primary work, and psychoanalysis, as Anna O had said, is a talking cure, but actually is more of a listening cure. So that Ted Jacobs has written some, Evelyn Schreiber from this city has written some, and there is some literature on listening, but not pulled together. I just published a book which just came out 2 days ago. I had only one copy, and I didn't bring it because I was dreading that if I brought that copy, I'll give it to you. And that's the only copy I had. No, really, and that's the only copy I had. But once my copies come, I'll mail one to you. A whole book on listening. A book is called Psychoanalytic Listening: Methods, Limits, and Innovations. But besides the talking activities of the doctor and the patient, and besides the listening activities of the doctor and the patient, various kinds of listening. There are 4 kinds of listening: objective listening, subjective listening, intersubjective listening, and empathic listening. And each of them have something to do with each other and something different from each other, and so on and so forth. Besides this talking and listening, there is also being. And that is how one is when one is with the patient. What is the attitude one brings to the situation? And that began to preoccupy me, because in that attitude were hidden certain spiritual and religious elements, I think. So I thought about it, and it turned to me that while the list is certainly not exclusive, that there were 3 attitudes of a real cool psychotherapist, which caught my attention. And those 3 attitudes were: number 1, survival. Number 2, vision. And number 3, faith. Survival, vision, and faith. Now, in these 3 attitudes, the way I conceptualize it, that in each 3, what I will tell you is that, let's take for each of them, I'll tell you a visual image so you can remember the attitude, see the picture of it. I told you I came from India. There are always gods everywhere around. So the visual business is very important. Indian people are like Chauncey Gardner. They like to see. That's why, for example, if you go to George Washington Memorial or Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., who do you see there? You see families, families, little children, latency age, 6, 8, 9, 10, with mother and father, take them there. You see retired people. You see tourists. That is about it. You never see extremely poor and hungry people. You never see lame and handicapped people. You never see people who have traveled, blind people, or a person with amputations traveled from Wisconsin or South Dakota. No, but you go to Taj Mahal in India. You'll see extremely poor people who have no money to eat. They have traveled to see the Taj Mahal. The Indians are into seeing. Darshan is called darshan, D-A-R-S-H-A-N, into seeing. And therefore, as I began to struggle with these attitudes, it came to me that what may be useful is to have an icon, a visual icon of each of these 3 attitudes, of survival, of vision, and faith. So you can see the picture. From that, you can learn what this idea is. So I'll give you a picture, then I'll tell you the development as to how this thing comes about, and then I'll tell you its technical implications. I cannot tell you how to use it. I'll tell you how it is used. And there's a difference in the two. And you'll see how it has been used by me as against how you should use it. You will see. First, survival. The visual icon of this is a toy which is called Weeble. And that is a toy which is a balloon which has a metallic base. As a result, if you kick it, it goes like this, and comes back again. Now that is the visual icon of survival. That means it can be moved, the position can be moved, and position can go away from itself, but it finds itself again. And it kind of recalibrates itself. Those of us who have been mothers and fathers know this very well, that there are children bring us joy and pride at every step of the way, but children can also be extremely annoying and sometimes quite ruthless and obnoxious. Now, in that obnoxious moment, what one feels like is to say something nasty, something cynical, and occasionally slap them. But we don't do this. We somehow bite the bullet, and we find the mommy self and the daddy self all over again. It is that journey from their obnoxiousness which puts us back into a cruel, ruthless, and vindictive mode, and the movement back into finding the mommy and daddy self again. It is that process that is called survival. Yeah? And how does it come into us? It came into us because when we were children, our mothers and fathers survived us. We, in imagination and in reality, attacked our mothers, and somehow they stayed mothers. Those of you young women, for example, if your child says to you, "You are the baddest mother I have, I hate you." Please understand, your child does not know you. He does know shit about you. What does he know about you? He doesn't know anything about you. He doesn't know where you went to college. He doesn't know what books you have read. He doesn't know what movies you like. He doesn't know what's your relationship with your aunt. He doesn't know which countries have you visited. He doesn't know you. He's not talking about you. He's not talking about you when he says, "I hate you, you're the worst mommy there is." He's talking about his experience of you as his mommy of this minute. That is not you. That is just one brick in this whole wall that you are. So that awareness has to be kept, and that will help you survive this. So what is the correct answer when the child says, "You're the baddest mommy there is, I hate you"? What's the correct answer? The correct answer is, "You know what? You may hate me, my darling, but I love you. What can I do?" Or, "Oh my God, you're so stuck with a bad mommy, but maybe bad mommy will be good, okay? Something. You stay the mother. You stay the mother. Let the child go this way, this way." My first supervisor, Vamick Volkan, he said to me, I was a baby then, 1974. He said to me, "Listen, let Tarzan swing on the vine. You be the tree. Because if the tree starts moving with the vine, how would Tarzan get off from the vine?" Good point, right? So that is what we got to do. That's where the person becomes capable of surviving. First is identification with the mother. That the mother has repeatedly tolerated distortions of the child and attacks of the child and ruthlessness of the child, and still stayed a mother. So that's one. Second is a particular game that children play with their father's body. And that is the game of testing his strength and attacking the father. Which the father invites. Father says, "Come on, hit me." So the child goes like this. Father says, "That's all you've got? Come on, hit me harder." So the child goes like this. Hit me on the tummy. "Come on, that's all you have." So the child goes like this. From this game, the child learns a very interesting lesson. The child learns, I can hit people and they will not collapse. I can be aggressive, but my aggression is not going to kill people. And just like my father can tolerate my fist on his tummy, I will one day become able to tolerate other people's fist on my tummy. And I would not keel over. These two things, the mother's maintenance of nurturing mode despite ruthless distortions of the child, and the father's lending of his body for physical strength and metabolism of physical aggression. These two things give rise to an internal capacity to identify with parental survival and therefore develop a capacity for survival oneself. Of course, the game of peekaboo adds to it. The child says, "I lived, I was able to survive." All this collapses and creates a capacity for survival. Then we go to a school and our teachers put up with us, and we drive our analysts and psychotherapists crazy. Every patient knows how to torture his analyst or her analyst. I had some tricks, and I must have driven. The one who died, he didn't die because of me. Let that be clear. He just developed cancer of colon. That toxic I'm not. I can be annoying, but I'm not that toxic. So, but every patient knows how to torture their analyst. We figure it out, and but the analyst survives. So that identification. Then we reveal stupidities and mistakes and outrageousness and ignorances to our supervisors, and they tolerate us. So there's the childhood capacities of survival, and then professional capacities that we identify with role models, and we become stronger bit by bit, and we are able to tolerate and survive our patients' distortions and movements within us. So the clinical example. Simple clinical examples. It can be in the aggressive realm. It can be in the erotic realm. Aggressive realm, here's an example. I open the door to a patient, and I'm in reasonably peaceful mode, working. Nothing too hot or cold inside my heart. I'm reasonably neutral, peaceful. I open the door, patient walks in, looks at me, and says, "Pissed again?" Those two words, "pissed again." I started feeling so angry. I wasn't angry a minute ago. I was not angry. I was actually quite peaceful. She says, "Pissed again?" And I felt like slapping her. Now, then we have to, that is the moment you're like a weeble kicked, and you've gone like this, now you come back. And you begin to think, why? Why is she wanting me to be angry? What is she doing? What is the purpose of this? What would she get if I get angry? What would happen if I get angry? Who is this person that she thinks I am? And so on and so forth. Right? So, by the time you started questioning this, you're already back in the therapeutic mode. You were shifted for a second out of it, and you come back in it. So hopefully you not react and speak when you are out of that mode. You come back and speak from here. The golden rule, which means follow it for 10 years. That's all it means, golden rules. Yeah. The golden rule is, let's suppose your name is Bob Johnson. The golden rule is listen from Bob, speak from Johnson. That's the golden rule. Golden rule. 10 years. 10 years. Listen from Bob, speak from Johnson. Meaning you have to receive the material in simple ways and then process it, and then you speak from your informed self. So that is the survival. This is survival of an aggressive moment. Take the example of survival of an erotic moment. I was giving a talk, I'd written a paper called Someday and If Only Fantasies. And the paper was about a kind of undue hopefulness and such, an idealization. But in the paper I was talking about that all human beings have someday fantasy. So by itself, someday fantasy is not abnormal. Someday I'll be a doctor, someday I'll do this, someday I'll do this, someday. That's how we live. That's not in a pathology. It's only when it becomes too demanding, too driving, too depleting of day-to-day life, too sadomasochistic and too narcissistic that it becomes pathological. Anyway, normal someday fantasies all of us have. So as I was giving the talk, I said I have a someday fantasy. And that is, and which arises mainly when I have a supervisee in my office, and I say, "Have you read such and such thing?" And he says, or she says, "No, I have not." So I said, let me find the book for you. As I started looking at my bookshelf, that fantasy comes. And the fantasy is that one day these books will be alphabetically arranged. Now I am not obsessional enough or masochistic enough to do it. I'm not sadistic enough to make somebody else do it. And I know even if it is done, it'll be messed up again. So this is actually never going to take place. But this fantasy is good. And it helps me. It soothes me. It's nice. The more regrets I get, then they become alphabetically and topic-wise, and so on and so forth. So I mentioned this. In the audience was one of my patients, a very beautiful woman, very, very beautiful woman. And so next day, she comes, lies down on the couch, straightens her hair, and she says, "I'm thinking that maybe this Sunday afternoon, I can come over to your office, and you and I can sit down on the floor and arrange all the books alphabetically." Now this turned me on. Who wouldn't be turned on by this? Who would not be turned on by this? You see? Please understand, when a patient says, "I want to fuck you," that never turns anybody on. That is orally aggressive and controlling and all kind of coercive. This was a real turn on. The Oedipal transferences do not come naked, so to speak. They come very beautifully dressed up. This was a real, my heart started to pound. This was cool. This was cool stuff. But so you get shifted like this, and you get into an erotic mode, and then you have to come back and say, why this seduction? How come this turned her on so much that she has to turn me on? What did it mean to her? What's she trying to do? And so on and so forth. And the moment you're thinking, you're back into the survival mode. So that's one attitude, survival. Finding your therapeutic self. finding your listening, thinking, and sorting out self again and again and again, and not acting from the impulse-ridden, instinctual, powerful self. When we say instinctual, this 1916 David Rappaport, what it means? Cyclical, intense, and wanting discharge and finding relief on discharge, right? That's called instinctual. Don't act from instinctual side. The moment, if it is something that is intense, that's a wanting to be discharged, and that you'll feel some relief after doing this, don't do it, right? That's precisely the point not to act. And you come back when it becomes optional. Now your ego isn't dominant. Should I? Should I not? Why not? Why? You're back into therapeutic mode. 1, survival. 2nd, vision. Vision, the icon would be, there was this orphan, orphans, very significant people. I've recently written a whole paper called Orphans. People, don't like these words. People get afraid of words. Even psychoanalysts get afraid of words. It's so shameful. But we shouldn't be frightened. We should call things as they are. Our surgeon, internist friends are not like that. They tell you, listen, I think your gallbladder needs to come out. They don't say, well, there's a green thing below the liver, which, is kind of round. No, they just say it's a gallbladder. They just say it, right? Same thing. So there was this orphan from Boston, lo and behold. Polish, father died, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, mother died, and such. And his name was Korczak Zilkowski. And he knew how to, he was illiterate, but he knew how to make things from his hands. So he made some statues, he made some more statues, and he was discovered by American Indians. There was a big American Indian conference, and some chiefs were going for a walk. They saw one of the statues. They said, this guy is amazing. And they called him, they arranged for him. They said, can you make a statue in the memory of American Indians? He says, where? He says, we have some land in South Dakota. He says, take me there. He went, he saw the mountain. He said, this is the mountain I'll carve. And I'll make the world's biggest statue, near Mount Rushmore, about another 10 miles away. And the statue, he went there, he put 3 conditions. I will work alone, no money from federal government, no money from a state government, only Indian people's money. And I'll make the world's largest statue. And it'll be in the round, so there's not an etching, it's a real statue, larger than Empire State Building. Larger, taller than Empire State Building, with crazy horse with his finger. My lands are where my dead are buried. Now, this guy, of course, started working. One person cutting a mountain? Of course not. But he kept working. So he married an American Indian woman and dutifully produced 13 children. And all of them work on that thing. Now the man is dead. People go there, sign, and say, it's been going on. It's been now 50, 60 years. And it'll be another 50, 60 years before it'll be done. But he could see the horse in the mountain. He said, this mountain is right to cut into a horse. To be able to see something inside something which still does not explicitly exist, and yet it can be seen. That is the icon. So remember the statue of Crazy Horse in South Dakota. I've been there twice. One time of 20 years ago, one time 10 years ago. And they keep all the registers. You go sign, and they see the progress. You take your children, then their children, and such and such. It's an amazing project. So now what happens is that we see this in a young mother whose toddler would not leave the coffee table. He's walking, he's like 11 months old, and he just walks like this. So the mother stands this far, 18 inches or 20 inches, and says, you can come, it's okay, it's okay. And in that encouragement that you can walk by leaving the table, just on your own, she lays down a visual tether, a visual rope of her imagination and her discernment of the internal potentialities of the child, and the child holds that rope and walks. It's when we teach our children how to take off the training wheels from the bicycles, we have a sense that they are ready to do it. They can do it. When our 9th grader comes home and is upset that they'll never pass this exam, we say, now, listen, you're upset today, take off, don't read anything, go to sleep, go play with Johnny. You can do it. I know you have it in you. You have it in you. Do you see? That is the thing. In the clinical situation, the whole idea of analyzability, which is like grandma's toaster, frankly. The concept of analyzability is like grandmother's toaster, which means it's old-fashioned, it's dusty, but it can make a toast. Yeah. But it is really, I mean, come on. This was slight bullshit, frankly, slight. And that is that this laid the whole burden on the patient. You are analyzable, you are not. Meaning you bring something with you, you don't bring something with you. What about me? What about me, right? Analyzability depends upon not only the patient, analyzable by whom? You may be analyzable by me, you may not be analyzable by me. You may be analyzable by somebody else, right? So analyzable by whom was never talked about. You know? I know, I can tell today, if I go back into analysis, that I know I would be unanalyzable by, I can tell 7 people in American Psychoanalytic Association. They wouldn't get me. They would not get me. And I can tell 6 others who might. You know? In fact, about 4 years ago, I needed some psychotherapy, and it was very problematic who to go to. You know, so I certainly couldn't go to anybody in Philadelphia. Everybody's my friend. And more or less everybody everywhere else. You know? So it was a very problematic thing. And I wanted to see a woman because I had 3 analysts and all 3 men. And I wanted to be in treatment with a woman. So I thought and finally located a woman whom I knew very little. I knew, I mean, it was impossible not to know anybody who was senior in the field. And yet knew very little and respected. And I went, and it was dramatically helpful. First of all, I mean, just the fact that she was a woman made a difference. So, which taught me another thing. This whole thing about man, woman, same diff. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it makes a profound difference. We don't know that difference. We haven't studied it carefully. But back to analyzability. Analyzability by whom? Analyzability when? Take this example. 23-year-old man, promiscuous man. Not analyzable. I don't think so. I don't think so. He has to have sex with 48 women before he'll become analyzable. That's the number I've come up with. 48 women he needs. Then he'll become analyzable. It's serious. I'm not kidding you. It's serious business. You see? You can't analyze a promiscuous young man. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You know, he thinks that women's body is like this. You press A, B, 2, 11, 9, 7, click, open. There'll be a diamond and you'll be rich forever. You will be rich forever. You'll never have to work. You know, you retire, buy a Mercedes, live forever. That's not true. But he cannot get it. He would not get it. He has to sleep with another 48 women before he'll start getting it. You see? A promiscuous man that was an analysis with me said, I've had sex with close to 200 women, but I never found a woman who had 3 breasts. Now, this is a very interesting statement. This is a very interesting statement because it has, I wasn't thinking of talking about this, but you know, but it's a very significant statement because it has multiple levels where you come at and how you listen. You know, what does a 3-breasted woman mean? In Freud, it means one thing. In Klein and Winnicott, it means another thing. So, the analyzability, by whom, when, about what areas of personality, under what circumstances. You know, those kinds of things. But analyzability does involve some vision. Same way termination. Patient says, do you think I'm ready to stop analysis? I think termination is always born in the heart of the analyst first. The analyst can see. You know, I have currently a patient where I think the analysis will end somewhere 2 years from now. I have seen it happen. Like, you suddenly become aware that this will end. The patient is not aware. And this idea that it will be 2 years is a defensive, obsessional defense against the anxiety and sudden revelation that a human being cannot handle. Human beings are weak people. They can handle the real shit. This is a real thing. You know. Then comes, so in clinical example, person says analysis coming to an end, and the person says, well, if I run into you after analysis, you will have nothing to do with me because you're no longer my therapist. And why would you want to do anything with me? Contrary-wise, she also has a fantasy that then you'll sexually seduce me because you're no longer my therapist. So she has two fantasies now, one of ignoring, one of impingement, which goes back to her childhood. A real father who abandoned her, a stepfather who sexually abused her. So we reconstruct it, but it doesn't do it anymore. 10 days left in the analysis, and the patient repeatedly saying these two things. And you interpret it backwards, it doesn't do anything. Suddenly it hit me, it doesn't need a backward interpretation. It needs a forward interpretation. So I said, actually, I think your anxiety is that you want me to reassure you. I was till yesterday saying that I wouldn't be like the father who abandoned you or like the father who seduced you. I said that I think you want to know from me that if and when I run into you after such and such date, I would not act like as if I'm your analyst, because I wouldn't be. But I would also not forget that I had been your analyst. When I said this, the patient became, now you could feel the movement and the connectedness and empathic understanding. Because I could visualize that anxiety in the future, that needed vision, to see what the person will be anxious at 2 months from now, after the analysis ends in October, and she's afraid of meeting me, running into me in a meeting in January. What would be her anxiety? Put yourself in her position, and then you sense it. It has nothing to do with the childhood father or mother. It has to do with the analyst. And one has to be mental enough to interpret it in reality and in future. So this is vision 2. Third, survival, vision. Third, faith. The best visual icon of faith is that when and if you have gone to a circus, those of you who have children perhaps will go to circus now. Those of you who have grandchildren will perhaps go to circus now. Those of you who have no children and grandchildren went to circus or should go to circus. So now when you go to circus, what happens is you're sitting and nothing is happening and you're getting bored out of your mind. And there is this guy who's walking around near the trapeze, and you want him to do something, and he's not doing anything. He just walks. And you're walking up there. He walks. Then he pushes one trapeze with the hand, and you want him to get on it. And ultimately, he gets on it. So he goes, swings, comes back, and then stands again. Then he swings a couple of times, he stands again. He's not doing anything. That's not making you excited. And then he swings, and he sits, comes back again. And one time he swings, and he leaves the trapeze and catches the other trapeze. And you feel thrilled. Now, if you had a camera, which should cost, I think, about $900, some kind of real thing, a big black thing or something, and you took a picture of this man when he was in the midair. He had left this trapeze, and he has not caught the trapeze. That is the man of faith. What was he doing before? I don't know, but I think he was working before with experience and knowledge. He had experience and he had knowledge. How far the trapeze goes, how much it comes back, what is the movement, experience and knowledge. But when he leaves the trapeze, there's no experience and knowledge in the moment when he's in the air. There's only faith. Now, faith in psychoanalysis has received 4 different kinds of attitudes. One from Freud, who basically considered it a fabrication, an evil fabrication, a fabrication that misleads human beings. Human beings should not require faith, they should live in reality. And he also, of course, considered reality and science as something, on one side, and faith on the other side, faith and religion on the other side. So for him, faith and reality were opposites of each other. And he thought that religion was basically evolved to compensate for man's narcissistic disturbance, disappointment in father, and continuation of dependency. On most of these counts, in my opinion, Freud was wrong. First, that he said that this is an infantile dependency perpetuated. When we are little children, we want God, father and mother to know everything. When we find out they don't know everything, we say, well, the father up there knows everything. And if you are really grown up, and if you are really able to mourn the fact that nobody knows everything and father and mother don't know everything, You should be able to live, trust science and knowledge, and that is about it, and then live happily ever after. And you should not have this kind of dependent longing. Well, it was easy for a man to say, who had a wife, who had a maid, who had a sister-in-law, who had 6 children and 2 dogs worshipping him every day with 21 cigars. Obviously he had taken care of all his dependency. If he stopped smoking, and if his wife and children left, and there were no dogs, I would want to see what he said about dependency. So I think this is a problem here. And secondly, this idea that an adult person should have no dependency, that's kind of nonsense. The only difference that happens is children's dependency is give me, give me, give me. Adult dependency is give me, give me, give me, take it, take it, take it. Both is interdependency. Without that, you become Unabomber if you are not connected to human beings. So I think Freud was mistaken. And this whole Freud has this Oedipus thing. Science was she, God was he, and Freud was with she, and he wanted to get rid of he. Come on. Also the problem happened that he was a Jewish man who had been raised by a Catholic nursemaid. So a hetero religion was inside of him, so that he was a Jewish man, but a Christian trapped in the body of a Jewish man. He needed surgery, So a Christian trapped in the body of a Jewish man. On the other hand, Bjorn was a Christian who was raised by a Hindu woman, an Hindu nursemaid who took him to temples in India. So he was a Hindu trapped in the body of a Christian. That is the mess that has happened in psychoanalysis. The only people who were in the same religion and religious, because they were living it out, they didn't have to write about it. Winnicott, Fairbairn, Guntrip, and 2 Jews who became Christians, Balint and Kohut. So this middle tradition, independent tradition, where religiosity is inherent, survival of the object is like resurrection of the Christ. New beginning of Balint is like being reborn. All this thing is in the independent middle tradition is inherent. And because they are living it out, they didn't theorize it. And the 2 people who theorized about religion were because their religion was of not the inside religion and outside belonging were different, therefore they were conflicted. So a big problem happened. Now there are 4 views of faith in psychoanalysis as far as I can understand. One, Freud's, that faith is an infantile fabrication and we should live only with reality. That's one. And in this view, reality can be found by science, and reality is opposed to faith, which is narcissism and omnipotence projected upward. That is faith as fabrication. Second is Erik Erikson's view, which is not really the basic trust of childhood, which happens due to infantile need gratifications, but that something good will happen, the world will be good, I will survive, I'll be taken care of. But this thing, the basic trust gets projected in future and meets a bifurcation. The conscious hope reflects our wishes. I'll buy a Mercedes, I'll buy a house, I'll become a doctor, and so on and so forth. That's conscious hope. Hope is trust projected in future, but it's conscious hope. The unconscious hope is not about wishes. The unconscious hope is about developmental needs, that there will be people who will help me grow. Life will provide me experiences to learn and grow and become more mature. Life will provide me experiences by which what I couldn't master as a child, I will be able to master. So unconscious hope is about developmental needs. This unconscious hope in the middle age, when Erikson actually becomes, really talks about aspects of wisdom, such as generativity, meaning taking care of the younger generation, and helping the younger generation grow and follow their own dreams, even if those dreams are not one's own dreams. Generativity. Second concept is care, that is being careful, taking care, and giving care, and such. And finally, also belief in a species, learning that there are no 2 kinds of Homo sapiens. There are only one species. Man is only one species, not 2 species. There are no black people, white people, no Chinese people, American people, no Palestinians and Israelis. There's only human beings. They're only human beings. And this concept that Erikson has, belief in a species, belief in a species, care, and generativity. These three things, when they get in the realm of unconscious hope, then they create a phenomenon by which a human being comes to a position somewhere, I think, around 60 or so, in which a new thing arises inside the human being, and that is an understanding that the world, not only people, not only mommy and daddy, and not only grown-up people, but the institutions of the world, democracy, justice, poetry, architecture, the institutions of the world, history, literature, and the given nature, mountains, rain, ocean, this will take care not only of me, but of people who are to come. And this idea is of faith. So true faith in Erikson is an earned faith through development and through the flowering of unconscious hope and its dispersal into non-selfish and non-human relationships. So there's a fabricated faith, there's an earned faith. Then in Winnicott, the faith is a given faith. That means parents will give you faith not by teaching and not by modeling, but by not questioning some aspects of yourself and leaving some things alone. So there's a famous sentence of Winnicott that there's a gentlemanly agreement between the parents and the child that they shall never ask, why do you love this blanket so much? Or there's a gentlemanly agreement between the parents and the child that they will never ask, did somebody give you this blanket or did you find it? These questions are not to be asked. Now here's also a difference between Jewish and Christian psychoanalysis. There is such a thing. It's a politically kind of risque thing to say, but there is such a thing. That in Jewish psychoanalysis, which is the classical analysis, regardless of Anna Freud or Melanie Klein, there are differences in the intensities. It's like, Budweiser and Bud Light. So, but it's the same beer, yeah? It's the same beer, the classical people, meaning there's something, drive, something pushing you from inside, you're defending against it, there's something hidden, let's find that out, and those kinds of things. So these are people who believe that everything can be said, should be said, will be said, must be said, and if it's not said, then you have to tell me why it is not said. And when you have exhausted those things, then you will tell me what is not said. And when you tell me what that is said, we'll find out that that is not what was not said. But there was something else that was actually going to be said. And then we will talk about that thing. And then we'll talk about why we were talking about all this, right? So that is one kind of psychoanalysis. That is Anna Freud and Melanie Klein, classical school. But in Winnicott, Guntrip, Masood Khan, Christopher Bolus, all these people, there is enormous respect for the idea that some things cannot be said. Something cannot be said, must not be said. And if they are said, they are not those things. The moment they are said, they are not those things. Take one small example. Winnicott's concept of true self. Now, let's suppose I come to you in psychotherapy. And I say to you, Dr. Stavros, you know me, I've written some books, and I'm a psychoanalyst, and I can speak, I can write, and I think I'm kind of cute and funny. But the fact is, this is all a lie. This is all a pretense. This is all fabricated structure around me. I'm basically a little brown little boy from India who likes to eat rice with hand and talk in Urdu. That's what basically I am. This whole American person wearing a tie, talking in English, this is bullshit. This is not me. Please understand, I now address to young people. This is what I have just said has nothing to do with true self or false self. This kind of a statement has nothing, zero, to do with true self or false self. This is not what Winnicott is talking about. This is nothing, zero, never ever believe this kind of talk. Do you see? This is not what Winnicott had in mind when he's talking about true self and false self. These are fantasies created for various purposes. These are defensive regressions from realistic authenticity. These are all kind of retrospective idealizations of the self. These are not related to true self and false self, the statement I just made. No. True self has no content. Listen to me. True self has no content. There's no such thing as true self. That's why Winnicott says that I can describe false self, but true self cannot be described. Because it's in the essence of living. It's in the essence of living. right? So that now, suppose you're eating an apple, and you bite an apple, and you're not thinking, it's good that I'm eating an apple, that I'm not eating meat, or it's how good my health will become, or my mother will be happy, or, oh, is this apple a forbidden fruit? Am I identified with Adam? And so on and so forth. If you're not thinking, if you're just eating a goddamn apple, that's called true self. That's called true self. You see, when you walk and you came and you sat down, that was called true self. That's why Winnicott says true self cannot be described, because true self is in the essence of psychosomatic going on being. It cannot be described. The moment you describe it, it's become false self. Now, this has powerful implications. That because the parents let the true self be, that's why it could be. If the parents had questioned it and labeled it, it would have become false self. Therefore, in Winnicott, in Freud, faith is a fabrication. In Erikson, faith is a developmental epoch. In Winnicott, it's a gentlemanly gift of parents. Just by letting you be, you will have faith, meaning you would know that there is something in you and there's something in this world, and you are going on. Do you see? Take the small thing, think about it. I'm born in India. When 0 to 26, I was living in India. Was I living in India? No, I was just living. I'm now living in the United States. That's a different thing. Living in the United States and living, like you, I assume, are born in USA. You're not living in, okay, let's assume. Excuse me. There goes the art of talking to the audience. So, do you see that if you're born in USA, please be born in USA. Yeah. Now, you are not living in America. No, you're just living. Or, for example, when you talk. When you're talking, you're not talking in English. You're talking. You're speaking. When I'm speaking in English. Those are two different things. They're not the same things. That is what Winnicott's true self is. That's what Winnicottian faith is. The faith arises from this smooth confluence between the figure and ground that is left unquestioned. And because of its being unquestioned, it creates an area of strength, of ongoingness, and therefore a grasp on the world and on the nature, and a sense that nature belongs to one and one belongs to the nature. 3, fabricated faith, earned faith, given faith. And then there's Bion. Bion was a little boy born in India. He was maverick, strange, schizoid, weird, and a genius. None of them was caused by his being grown up in India. Actually, his being leaving India may have caused his weirdness. Because at age 8, the father came home. This boy needs to go to a good school. There's no good school in India. Send him to England. At age 8, father, mother, and younger sister remained in India. This boy was sent to England. Didn't see his mother and father till age 17. 9 years living in a little boy in dorms. That should do it. And then, of course, Bion was the only psychoanalyst in the world who was in combat, in real war, and saw people getting killed. One person's brain fell on his face, and some such thing. So, he had interesting experiences. He never went back to India. He went this way. He went from England, he came to New York, Los Angeles, then he went to Argentina. He never went to India. And there's a guy, Rafael Lopez Carvo, who's in Toronto. I found out, I thought he was in Argentina. He's not. He's an Argentinian, but in Toronto. Bion has a concept called, I'll come back to Lopez Carvo. Bion has a concept called O. Now, by O, he means the ever-present, self-evident, absolute truth. In Bion's thinking, truth is already present. It's already there. 100% truth is already there. You don't have to make it up. It's already there. And it's everywhere. So how can you get to it? Unlike all other psychoanalysts, Bion proposes that thoughts cannot be produced by thinking. In fact, thoughts are already there. Thinking can be done in response to thoughts. Thoughts can produce thinking, but thinking cannot produce thoughts. Thoughts are nouns like tree, house, cat. Thoughts already exist and exist before the mind, which is what is spooky about him. That's what happens when you come from India. So, he was a little boy. Freud was a little Jewish boy being carried to Catholic church. Music, hymns. He used to come, stand, put cardboard boxes, Freud, and stand up at age 5, say there are 3 gods, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. His father got really pissed off. He had Christianity inside of him from which he struggled all his life. He adored Oscar Pfister, much younger, 20 years younger than Freud. He adored him. And he wrote letters in which he says, due to the mercy of the Lord, Martha has fallen in love with me. Due to the divine intervention, I've gotten accepted in medical school. Due to, the Oscar Pfister is a man of the Lord. He's taking us to divine heaven, kingdom, and I'm merrily following him, and so on and so forth. Bion, on the other hand, was a Hindu inside and Christian outside. So this Hinduism, this going to temples in villages of Punjab with his Hindu nursemaid, made him hear the main and fundamental basic sound of Hindu chanting. Om. He cut the M out. Because the moment you put the M, there's a separation. The sound ends. And he did not want to be separated from that woman and from India. So the concept became O, round like a breast and unending. Conflict-free, round like a breast, conflict-free, unending sound. So independently, now Neville Symington and I have completely different interpretations of the word O. Raphael Lepose-Corvo, who has written an entire book on Bion, he and I independently come to the same conclusion, and that is this O comes from India. Raphael Lepose-Corvo says that once Bion entered a meeting like this, standing at the back row, the meeting was not of psychoanalysis. In Argentina, somebody was giving a talk about Mahabharata, which is an old, 4,000 years old book in India. And Bion enters and he's stand there transfixed and starts crying. He's 70, 75 years old by that time. So India was alive inside of him. And this O concept, ever present, omnipotent, absolute truth, which is already existing. So how to find it? Because thinking will not produce it. So Bion comes to an amazing conclusion. The only way to find the truth is to stop thinking, to not think. Now, if you remember the scene, those of you who have seen this movie, my brother, who is a successful, very powerful film producer in Bollywood, he doesn't think it's even a movie, but that's his problem. I have seen this movie 10 times, sometimes laughed, sometimes cried, called My Dinner with Andre. Now, in that, there's a dialogue, 2 people talking, just having dinner. So one of them says, why is it we have to go to India or Nepal or Tibet to see God? Is there no God in Manhattan? And the guy gives a very good answer. The guy says, yes, Wally, there is God in Manhattan. But the problem is that we are too busy to see him. In Manhattan, we are too busy. So we have to go to some place to be unbusy. Now, this is what Bion is talking about. Thought will not be produced by thinking. In fact, thinking will mess up thoughts. Not thinking. I have had about 10 good thoughts in my life, which is not bad, and I'm getting them more now. And all of them have occurred either in the shower or driving alone without a cell phone and no radio on. Only then. It'll catch you. So, to give you a concrete example, Oedipus complex. Was there no Oedipus complex before Freud or before Sophocles? I mean, before Sophocles, there was no such thing as Oedipus complex. Before the word Oedipus was known, there was no Oedipus complex. What nonsense. Of course there was. Only Sophocles and Freud caught it. How long has E is equal to B in MC square? How long has E is equal to B in mc square? Simply because Einstein enunciated it? Does that mean that it was not true before? It was true before. It was true forever. Which leads to a very, very weird idea. And that is, there is no such thing in this world as invention. Everything is a discovery. This is beyond, and therefore spooky, very spooky. Now the trapeze artist. So when you come back to the clinical situation, what happens? You're listening to a patient. Beyond has a phrase called the act of faith. There are times that the analyst performs or is made to perform an act of faith, where you leave all experience and all knowledge behind. And in fact, it is wrong, I think, to say you leave it. That moment makes you leave it. A patient of mine who was a very lonely person had led a life of abject aloneness, and despite education and financial resources, lived in a life of very severe self-deprivation. Then around mid-40s, she had an affair with a married man and came alive. And the affair was good for her. She was single, the man was married, and the affair was extremely limited, very tightly circumscribed, in the sense that he will come to her apartment, they'll have sex, they'll play some card games, blah, 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 and various kinds of chess they played and all kinds of things, and then the man will leave 2 or 3 times a week. And this went on for about 1.5 years or 2 years. And it made her so happy and so alive. She did not want anything more. He did not give her anything more. One day, the man disappeared, couldn't be found. She became suicidal. That's how she came to see me. As we worked twice a week, face to face, some years, 1.5 or 2 years down the road, she got a bird. She was a very lonely person. So she got a bird as a pet and became extremely attached to the bird. And the bird, whose name was Dino, was constantly in the session and constantly being talked about with great subjectivity and fine nuances of thoughts attributed to the bird, which I never interpreted and questioned. It was not necessary. It would have only showed that I was clever. And that's not the purpose of psychotherapy. That is the purpose when you're beginning. That is the purpose. But that's not the purpose of psychotherapy. So now this went on. One day the bird died. The bird died. She could not get rid of the bird's body, so she put it in the fridge. Now, again, I found a part of me, which was an old part, that I would have felt it a great trophy, therapeutic trophy, to have gotten rid of that bird in the fridge. I would have felt what a good doctor, psychotherapist I am if she threw away that bird from the fridge. I could reminisce that part. I was not in that part anymore. I knew that it doesn't matter. First of all, I suppose all the people in this room have a dead bird in the fridge. Chicken, turkey. Yeah. Simply because you have not killed it, that doesn't mean it is not dead. And simply because the feathers have been taken off, that doesn't mean it's not dead. So don't worry about it. We are not refrigerator repair people. I'm not a Maytag man. I'm a psychoanalyst. What do I care what people put in their fridge? Who gives a damn? So now the important thing was not the bird in the fridge, but the frozen grief. As we are talking, one day the patient says the following. The patient says, yesterday I went back from work and I went to my apartment and I was sitting near the window looking down, and suddenly from the corner of my eye, I saw a spider. And I saw a spider, and the spider was very dark, black spider, beautiful. And a thought occurred to me. Now, please also understand the patient is not Indian. I want you to know this because of what she's about to say. Patient is not Indian, patient is not Hindu, patient is American, Jewish. Patient says, a thought occurred to me that maybe Dino has become transformed and has reincarnated as this spider and come to meet me. But obviously there's no such things. There's no such thing as reincarnation, and there's no such thing. She's not looking at me, she's looking like this, away from me. There's no such thing as reincarnation, and there's no such thing as birds becoming spiders. It can't happen, but who knows? Maybe it can happen. Then she looks at me, she says, "You don't think I'm crazy, do you?" I said, "No, I don't think you're crazy at all. In fact, I think this spider is a poem." Now, when I said this sentence, I didn't know what it meant. I did not know. And if I have to be absolutely honest, the correct way of saying is, I didn't say the sentence. The sentence was said by me. You cannot do these kinds of things. I didn't say it. It was said by me. The spider is a poem. When I said this, the patient now is looking at me. Her eyes began to shine. She broke into a big grin, was extremely happy, but it lasted like 5 seconds and disappeared. And then she says, what do you mean? So I said, look, when I said this, you knew what I meant, instinctively and immediately. But you are a very self-destructive person and self-hating person. So that understanding of your own, you could not tolerate that you were smart and connected with me and knowledgeable, and you destroyed it. So now, if you want, I will try to think what I meant and try to tell you and try to find the meanings of it inside of myself and between us. Or you can do that. What do you think? And then the session went on. But the point is that this comment, that the spider is a poem, is precisely what Bjorn says is an act of faith. Because it is visible to you. It is the truth of the moment. Right? It is E is equal to MC square. It is there forever. The spider was always a poem. Now, obviously, one can go back and deconstruct it. And hundreds of meanings will come, why I was able to say this. But that was not the thing. You see? It's like, when, if you're watching football, which incidentally, the Eagles game is going on, it's terrible. You put me in a bad time on this speaking. So now what happens is that, when the quarterback is running, and the guy upstairs, actually John Madden, I miss him. John Madden is speaking. He is saying, Vic is doing this and this and this. Vic is not doing this and this. He's saving his ass. He's saving his ass and he's running as fast as possible. That's all he's doing. Right? That's all he's doing. So the theory is in his body. The theory is not in his mind. It's an implicit memory, not a discursive memory. So when it was said by me, in that moment, it was an act of faith. Now we can go and retrospectively analyze how come I was able to say this. And I have thought about it. And there are many, many other examples. This doesn't happen every day. These moments, the person you have to read about this kind of thing, just the way an internal passivity is also necessary, just the way activity is necessary. Both things are necessary in doing psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is a fantastic mixture of deliberateness and spontaneity. And we need both things. And in that thing, we move back and forth. But it is the spontaneous moment in which you have left experience and knowledge behind. And you left the trapeze of experience and knowledge before you catch the second trapeze. You are, in that moment, a man of faith. And these three qualities, survival, vision, and faith, are essential not only for being a therapist, but being a parent, being a mother or a father, and being a friend, and just living in general. So that's what I have come to conclude about it. Had I not read Charlotte's Web to my son when he was a little boy, would I be able to get this spider thing? Had I not been in love with Holland and gone to a little town called Barn, where M.C. Escher was born and raised, and visited his house, would I be able to see the transformation of a bird into a spider? We don't know. But these are John Madden's speculation. And when we are doing psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, we may be John Madden at times, but mostly we are Michael Vick. Thank you very much.